welcome to another episode of I Made That. I'm your host, Chloe Emme. I Made That podcast. Welcome to another episode of the I Made That podcast. Today I have one of my personal favorite people on. I'm so excited. We have Alex Rodriquez of Alex Rodriquez Photo. So Alex is a really super amazing and wildly successful photographer. She works predominantly with weddings and high-end branding, specifically in the hospitality, food, and wine space. She has built quite a portfolio and she's wild enough to even work with me on branding photos. So in any case, welcome my guest today, Alex Rodriquez. How's it going, Alex?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. We have worked pretty extensively together on a lot of different things, but I don't think we've ever spoken about creative process. So I would like to just kind of dive in. Before we get too far into it, for those of our listeners that are not super familiar with your work, can you describe in your own words what you do?
So I am a wedding and brand photographer based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I specialize in the hospitality end of branding photography and destination and higher budget weddings.
I know you have some really fun stuff on the books. I think one of the things that I'm most jealous about when it comes to your job is the travel that you get to do. I feel like I always see a lot of really cool destinations. Can you give us a sneak peek at what like your next year looks like in terms of locations?
Yeah, next year is going to be pretty wild. I have two international weddings that are booked that I'm very excited about. The first one is Greece, and then the second one is actually in Italy, which is like both of those are my dream destinations. So I'm super excited for those.
You know, just live it up in the Mediterranean. Super jealous.
I know.
So, okay. So now that we have an idea of what you do, I don't even think that I know this. How did you get into photography?
I was in high school and I saved up all of my babysitting money to buy a camera. And not many people know this story because I feel like I don't talk about it, but I saved up all of my money to like babysitting money to buy my first camera, and it was like a cheap kit camera or whatever. And I joined the yearbook club and I got super into it. And I had no idea that you could make a living doing this. And I actually had teachers who were like, you're never going to succeed like having your own business, which is insane that, I had a dream and they were like, not going to work. You're not going to be able to make a substantial living off of that. So I actually went to college for a semester, and at that point I had been taking photos of like family and friends, and I had even started booking some clients like families and senior photos and stuff like that. I hated college. I was going to go for nursing, and I hated it every minute of it. And I knew that that was just not what I was supposed to be doing. And then 2020, actually, my business kind of blew up, which was a blessing in disguise and so unexpected because I think everybody in 2020, like no one knew what was going on or, anything. So it was it was definitely a pleasant surprise. And that was kind of when I realized that this was what I was supposed to be doing. And at that point, I was like, I'm going all in. Like, this is what I want to do. I love working with people. And from there, I've just continued to build and grow.
That's so cool. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me from that story is I also never had anybody tell me that you could own your own business. And I think that's insane. I don't know about you, but where I grew up, we were told that you could go to college. They were really big also on trade school being an option. And those are both great options, but nobody ever told me I could own my own business, which is even wilder, I feel like, in my experience, because where I grew up, we had a ton of people that worked for themselves. So a lot of my friends' parents were self-employed and it wasn't even a notion. So what do you think really gave you the confidence to go out on your own? Was it just something in you that always knew that this was a thing? Or like, how did you kind of block out that feedback from other people in your life?
I've always kind of been, I don't want to say a risk taker, but I definitely have always had, and maybe it's like the oldest child in me, where it's like when people say no to me, I'm like, okay, well then I'm gonna do it in silence and tell you later that I told you so, you know? So it was more so like, not that I wanted to be able to prove everyone wrong, because I feel like that's not the right way to go about doing things, but I feel like in my head, instead of it making me feel like I couldn't do it, I was like, I knew inside of me that I had the capability and the potential to do it, and I think that that's what's driven me, like, all this time, and even in, like, I'm sure you know, but, like, there's definitely lows with being a business owner, and in those times where I'm like, I've literally sat and just, like, thought, like, am I what is this all for? Like, am I supposed to be doing this? And I think that that's what's gotten me through is, like, knowing deep down that, like, I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't supposed to be. You know, just having that drive of, you gotta keep going.
Yeah. And I think that really comes through in your work. You can tell that you love what you do. I think that it's also really rare to find something that you're so passionate about at such a young age. So I think that's also a really cool experience to have. I think that I know so many people in my life that are still figuring out what really drives them. And not that you or I have life all figured out by any means, but I think it is really a fun experience to get to understand what you want to do with your life from such a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is, like, such a gift and, like, a blessing, and that's not something that I take for granted because I do know people that, they're still trying to figure it out, you know? They're 30 years old and then they're like, "Well, I wanna figure out what I wanna be when I grow up," and it is a struggle, and I think that as a business owner, like, things are always changing too, like, and sometimes you do get bored with it and you find ways to revamp that, like, spark.
I guess, kind of to piggyback off of that, what do you find yourself doing when you do need to recharge? Like what really lights like your creative fire? I know for me that when I get in a rut, I need to go practice some other medium. So I really like to paint or just like practicing being creative in other ways. Do you find that that's the case for you or like what do you do to recharge your creativity?
Honestly, I find myself needing to draw inspiration when I'm, like, stuck in a rut like that. Travel is, like, the biggest thing for me. John and I love to travel. I just draw so much inspiration from different places. I think that at that point, it's just, again, drawing inspiration and being able to, like, I'm a very visual person, so even if it's literally, like, picking up a magazine or like a wedding publication or stuff like that. It's super helpful for me to visualize things and get those creative gears moving again. It's like oiling up an old machine, you know?
Yeah. What do you think your favorite place that you've been so far is?
My heart, I always leave my heart in Arizona. And that's probably, like, my favorite place that I've been to, and I've never been out of the country yet, so that very well may change. But, like, in the US, the desert is just my happy place. Aside from that, like, I love New York City and California. Those are 2 places that are very different, but there's so much just going on in both of those places, and it's crazy how wildly different they are, but so similar. The amount of like heart and inspiration that I draw from both of those places is insane.
I think that there is a lot to be said. I could never live in a big city, but I love Los Angeles. I think that there's so many cool people in such a concentrated area there, a lot of really passionate, creatively driven people that it is really inspiring to go kind of like plop yourself down in that and be immersed at least for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what does your creative process look like?
I feel like, well, so I consider myself an organized mess, and I think that that's important to know, because it always looks different, and I feel like on different projects, I really have to be able to put myself into it 100%. And again, that looks different for every single thing. You know, weddings are one thing, and then branding is another thing, but like it's so client based. I think that the first thing is just like brainstorming. I love dreaming with my clients, whether it's like sitting down over a cup of coffee or meeting, you know, in a Google Meet or FaceTime to just go over their ideas and like what their vision is. And from there, I'm able to kind of again draw inspo and you know figure out like what how I can make their vision come to life while also creating like art because that's what I always strive to do. You know, I really strive to craft imagery that evokes emotion and feels artful and soulful and again, you know, speaks to the client's vision.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally experienced this. I was laughing so hard this last round of photos that I actually got in from you for this podcast. You captured me in a way that it was like too real for me. I was like, oh, this is like for sure what I look like day to day. And I've never had anybody capture that in photos, like just all my expressions. And I was looking through them with my husband, and he was just like, oh my God, this is 100% you. So I can see that idea of kind of like evoking emotions literally through people, but also like capturing that in the photos and then having the viewers experience that as well. And I think that that's something that you do such a wonderful job at. I think you have a very refined style also, which how would we explain for the listeners what your aesthetic is?
I have a hard time like describing it because I feel like it's so many things into one, and that's something that I've really like worked hard on is figure like finding my voice through my photos and figuring out like what I like and how to get the photo, like how to manipulate my photos to make them look exactly as I want them to while still being authentic and very true to life. I guess the way that I describe like my wedding photos per se is very timeless, but also nostalgic and intentional. I find that authenticity is so important to me, but I also want to make sure that I'm intentional about the things that I'm capturing. So I guess the style of like photography and like the way that I'm capturing things, that those would be the ways that I would describe my style.
That's really interesting. I don't know that initially I would have thought nostalgic, but when you said that, it does click because they have like almost this like vintagey feel, but it's like still very modern. I don't know. So I think nostalgic is a great way to kind of wrap that up. What like either specific photo or like body of work would be your most favorite thing that you've ever worked on? It could be like a full project, just anything that stands out from your career so far.
I have a hard time answering this because I feel like all of my projects are my favorite. So like pinpointing one is like really, I think, a hard thing to do. And truthfully, like I do love like all of the projects that I work on. I'm at such a point in my business where I have been able to be selective about the people that I'm working with, and it connection is really important in that. So I guess to answer your question, I will say there's one wedding that I did recently that I am very proud of, and I think that that's just because it's the closest that I've gotten to working with my ideal clients and like my dream clients, you know, and I should say all of my clients are my dream clients and I love them all. But this wedding just like really stood out to me. The connection that I had with the couple and the work that went into piecing the wedding together behind the scenes and like the aesthetic and the visuals and everything was just so thoughtfully curated that capturing it was just, I mean, it was incredible and it's some of my favorite work that I've ever done.
Oh, that's so fun to have those experiences. I feel like it's really meaningful as an artist to have people let you in to something like that intimate and personal. So that sounds like a really nice project to be a part of.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So I know you said that in terms of that, you were kind of talking about, oh, well, these are my dream clients. What do you look for? Do you have like non-negotiables? I know for me personally, I'm at a point in my life where I don't really care what the application is. I work on all kinds of projects, but I have to work with people that love what they're doing. You have to be fired up about what you're doing. So I don't care, small, large, whatever size business you're in, as long as you're very passionate about that. I want to be around you. I'm going to get stoked about it too. What are your like non-negotiables when it comes to clients?
I think connection is the biggest thing for me at this point in time. I have definitely taken on clients in the past where I've met with them and I've gotten off the phone with them and I'm just like not 100% sure. And then they're like, well, we want to book with you. And I'm like, okay, because I'm such a yes person. And so I think that that was like a struggle for me. And then I've really learned that in business, when you do that, like when you take clients like that and you're working on such a personal level on something that's so like, I mean, your wedding day is like one of the biggest days of your life. It's a huge event. So when you're working with people so closely and so personally on something like that, connecting with them is so important. And if you don't connect with them, you're not going to be able to serve them in the best way possible. So I think that out of everything like that, really is that's my one checkbox that I'm like, if I connect with the couple, I will. And there's other things too that follow after that. Like if they have a vision for their wedding that I know I will not be able to serve them in my best and fullest capacity, I'm not going to say yes to them.
I think that that is very admirable of you because I think there are a lot of people out there that will take money for jobs when they know that maybe their aesthetic doesn't necessarily match up, or maybe they can't provide everything that the client is looking for. So I think having that level of exceptionalism and really having to say, I'm only going to take clients where I can fully be all in on this, I think is really, really admirable. So I think that was a great answer.
Thank you. It's definitely hard. I feel like when you're a business owner and it's like you want to be able to serve everybody, but it doesn't work like that. And unfortunately, in the long run, you're going to be hurting yourself more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I don't know about you, but I think for sure that's something that I had to learn through experience, unfortunately, and taking on so called like red flag clients when I knew that I shouldn't have. Now that we've kind of talked through what your process is and what your dream clients are, where do you look to for like inspiration? Like, are there any particular photographers? I know we talked about as far as like travel, you get really inspired by the environments and the visuals. But as far as like bodies of work, are there any specific photographers or artists or anybody that you are really inspired by?
There's so many photographers, like luxury photographers. I am being completely honest when I say that I could not give you their names because I follow them all on Instagram and I see their work and it's just like, I just like sit there and dream about like getting to the point that they're at. I feel like another big thing and like a place that I've been going to for inspo recently is wedding magazines, publications like Vogue. I mean, even when they show guests like their fashion and like the clothes that they're wearing, and then these like insane weddings, the celebrity weddings. Like I saw Sophia Richie's wedding was one of the weddings that I saw that I was just in awe. Like it was incredible. And I think at that point I was like, this that aligns so much with what I want to be documenting. Maybe not to the point of like where I'm capturing celebrities. I mean, it would be cool, but I feel like moving closer to that, I would be very happy and feel fulfilled.
I think for me, whenever, and I'm not in the wedding industry, but I definitely love to gawk. And I think the level and attention to detail in those events that are costing people, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars is just absolutely insane, over the top, decadent. And it's so fun to visually look at. And I know that I feel like personally, like a lot of your photography is in the details. So I feel like I could totally see you really aligning with something like that where every single detail has been thought about and then you get to capture that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a dream for me is that's true though. Like all of the details and the amount of intention that's put into those wedding days is, I mean, it's truly incredible. It sucks that it costs so much money. They always turn out so beautiful.
You know what I love from a visual perspective when it comes to weddings that I think when I think like over the top, decadent, just beautiful and visual Indian weddings. Have you
Oh my
seen?
gosh.
Yes. Somebody,
They're
if we have
so
any
amazing.
Indian listeners, like I would love to go to an Indian wedding, so like please put
And
us on the guest list.
I would like to photograph it.
Okay, perfect.
That's like a dream. I've never been to one, but you just like I've seen like TikTok videos and stuff, and it's just like I mean, the celebration, it's so beautiful too, like
Mm-hmm.
every detail, and they're so like intricate. I just
Yes. And I love all the colors because I think obviously in American culture, it's very like white. I know that like, we've gotten kind of outside of that. My wedding dress actually was very risque. It was like a blush, a very light blush pink underneath, like white lace. So there was, a little bit of color in there, but not like, just full rooms full of like red and orange and gold and like all these beautiful, luscious like colors.
yeah.
What do you think your favorite, I guess while we're on this topic, what is your favorite current wedding trend?
That's a really good question, and I feel like I'm loving the direct flash photos. The very like old Hollywood vibe flash photography, I think is just so fun and nostalgic, but also super like classy and timeless.
It's really funny that that makes me think about. And I feel like really old. Okay, so side note, I turned 31 this year, you guys. I'm not like that old, but this makes me feel elderly. People are now buying on eBay like the handycam camcorders because they like, basically the shit quality that you get out of them. Like that's a thing. Like how we used to buy Polaroids when we were little. I'm not
I
ready
thought
for
about
this.
I thought about buying one literally yesterday.
Stop it.
I was literally looking at them because I would not add videography to my services. That I looked at like the camcorders are like a huge thing right now. Not
Yes.
only that, but Super 8 films. I looked at getting one of those as well. And I have no idea how to operate that, but
No.
I think it would be fun.
I understand. So I grew up, both of my parents are very artistic. We always had cameras around. And, obviously when we were growing up, everything was on film. And there is a lot to be said for like the grit and the grain and like the different quality that I really don't think you can truly replicate. Again, going back to, your nod to like
Hmm.
authenticity, I think that that just has a lot to do with it. But have you only ever shot digital? Have you ever dabbled in film?
I have not. However, and you'll be the first to hear it, I think I'm gonna be adding film to my services for next year. And it's gonna be a very like soft launch of it. Because again, I have no experience in film at all. It's something that I've always been very interested in. I've always loved like photography, and I mean, obviously the taking pictures part of it is amazing, but I think that having like heirlooms, tangible photos is just so like amazing. And film is just like it just brings me back to like when I was a child. And so I think that it'd be really cool to just be able to like offer that to my clients.
I love that. I think that would be so fun. I think that there's a lot to be said too. I mean, this is from a totally different perspective, but in another one of my previous lives, I also was an accountant. And so when you learn how to do all this stuff, you have to learn how to manually do it in basically like an Excel spreadsheet before you get to go and use what we actually use day in and day out, which basically like fills everything out for you when you input one number. And I think that the fun part of film from like the outside of looking in is really understanding, taking the photos and understanding like the aperture and like whatever, but like having to manually adjust everything and even maybe getting involved in like developing and what that does. Cause I think we have, like Photoshop and Lightroom now. And it's
Hmm.
funny to think about we have all these different settings in there that people would have to manually adjust, like all this vocabulary comes from the darkroom. It didn't just
Hmm.
pop up with the software. So I think that could be a really fun, creative journey for you to dabble in. So I'm excited to see how that turns out.
Yeah, I am too. From what I've heard, it's a completely different beast than digital photography. I feel like I have a decent enough background in photography to, at least understand the basics. And when in doubt, there's YouTube Academy. So
Thank God for YouTube. I have my entire life has been learned on YouTube.
seriously.
Okay. Another thing I really want to go over is the different hats that you wear as a creative professional. I know this bleeds a lot over into like the business side of things, but can you just talk to us about like the different roles that you feel like you have to play?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm a one person show. I should probably be outsourcing. But I do it all by myself. Some days I'm a bookkeeper, other days like I'm a social media marketer, and then like obviously photographer, editor. I'm trying to think of all of the other things. It's so hard because I feel like when you reach a certain point in your business, you're no longer like you're still doing all of these things, but it's just like kind of an umbrella where you're just like I'm an entrepreneur, I'm constantly, doing administration things for my business, client outreach, marketing, advertising is a huge thing. Networking is another thing. There's many hats.
Is there anything that you absolutely hate doing? I know that I definitely have stuff that's like at the bottom of my list.
Yeah, I hate dealing with the finances of my business. I could do literally everything else. And I will say I do have an accountant that is great. And helps me with all of that stuff. But just like the back end of like the day-to-day things, just like it's so tedious. And I'm not a numbers girl. I do not enjoy working with numbers or like doing math. So I think that bookkeeping and accounting is probably like the one thing that I could very well do without.
I feel you. I think that in general, a lot of more like creative leaning people, I feel like that's pretty typical. I feel like usually
Hmm.
there's like one side of your brain that works better than the other. And if it's very creative, it's not super into like the logic, mathematics, like very in line side of things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm
um,
not very good at that stuff.
well, thank God for accountants, right? I totally forgot to ask you this earlier when we were talking about more like diving into the client side of things, but do you have anybody that would be like your dream client?
Like a celebrity or just like,
I mean, it really could be like a specific person, or it could be more of like a project, or more just like a vague description of like, oh, I would want to, shoot a wedding where everything was built out of roses. I don't know, like whatever you're.
gotcha. Um, Well, I think that I booked my like dream client. Like that Italy wedding that I have next year, I'm just super excited for. Like European vibes, very like old money, classy. Um, I think like black tie, like that would be like a dream client for me.
Love that. I could totally see that aligning with your style, like very like warm and nostalgic and not like super overstated. I feel like that old money aesthetic of like everything is really nice, but it's not
Hmm.
in your face
Yeah.
really aligns with your style. It's very like pared down and purposeful.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I have had a lovely time chatting with you. I have just one more question. I have to ask everybody that comes on this podcast, what is the wildest story that you can tell me on this podcast?
So this didn't happen to me specifically,
Oh boy.
but this happened at a wedding that I photographed, and I actually was not there at this point in the night. But I this happened at a wedding that I was at last year, and my cousin was the wedding planner. And she called me the next morning and she's like, dude, you're never gonna guess what happened after you left so and so's wedding last night. And I was like, what? And what she told me next, there was no way. Like, I never would have even thought about it. And there was a fight that broke out, and um, the best man was like breaking it up, and his finger slipped into the guy's mouth, and the guy bit so hard that his finger got bitten off.
Stop
So
this.
I think that it was on the news like the week after that, and I think that that qualifies for a wild story, right?
That is for sure a new one. I have not had anybody tell me that anybody has lost any type of limbs yet in these stories. So you
Yeah.
take the cake for that. Thank God. I don't think I would have been able to handle that.
Oh, no, no, no. I was so grateful that I was not there. And what's even crazier is we went out the day, I think it was the day after their wedding, and me and my cousin who was the wedding planner, we ran into their wedding party the day after around Halloween. Like, we were out, and I was like, this is insane that we're like such a small world. And that fact that that happened, I was just like, and that, I mean, that story lives in my head rent free. Like, every time that people are talking about like crazy weddings, like crazy stories or like things that happen to them at weddings, I'm like, do I have a story for you?
That one definitely delivered. That for sure qualifies as a crazy story. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that with us.
You're welcome.
Well, Alex, I super appreciate you. I think this was really fun to kind of chat through process. I'm so excited for you. You have a lot of really cool stuff going on, and I'm excited to continue to see what you do. I think the last thing before before I let you go, can you shout out your website, social media, wherever people can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Alex Rodriguez Photo. Rodriguez is spelled with a Q, not a G. And then my website is also alexrodriguezphoto.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you. This was so much fun.